Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the magnolia trees, casting long shadows across the rose beds I'd spent most of the afternoon pruning. I was still wearing my wide-brimmed hat and gloves smeared with soil when I heard the rustle at the mailbox. Usually, it was just catalogs or donation letters I never opened, but this envelope was thick, stiff, and too formal for junk. My name, Mrs. Mara Whitmore, was printed in that tight, lawyerly font I'd learned to recognize over the years. I took it inside, placed it on the kitchen counter next to the watering can, and peeled my gloves off slowly. Something in me knew before I opened it. Still, I unfolded the letter, carefully smoothing its creases as if that would soften what it said. Please do not attend the upcoming Whitmore family reunion. It's best we part ways for now. Graham. No salutation, no mom, just the signature. My son's name carved into the white space like an ending. I stood still for a long time. The kitchen felt quiet in that unnatural way, when even the refrigerator seems to hush itself. I read the sentence again and again. The words didn't change. A breeze came in through the screen door and lifted the corner of the letter. I pressed it back down with my palm and stared at the ink as if it might dissolve under the weight of my gaze. Then I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a few seconds longer than necessary. Understood, I typed. One word, no punctuation. I hit send. Outside, the garden hose lay half-coiled near the hydrangeas, forgotten. The water still ran in a quiet stream over the gravel, steady, careless. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the letter once more, then folded it slowly and placed it back in the envelope. I had given him everything, and now I knew that meant nothing. By the next morning, I was already thinking about the trust. The day Graham turned 6, we buried his father. I remember the way he clutched my hand at the cemetery, trying so hard not to cry, even though I was weeping too hard to offer him much comfort. He wore a little suit that didn't quite fit his frame, and he kept glancing up at me like I was supposed to know what to do next. I didn't, but I told him we'd figure it out together. I sold the house a month later, the one Daniel and I had bought before Graham was born, with the white fence and the lemon tree out back. Too many memories clung to the walls. We moved into a modest apartment on the south side of Charleston. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and not much light, but it was clean, and it was ours. I took a job at the middle school in the mornings and worked the evening shift at the library on weekends. During summers, I tutored neighborhood kids and picked up shifts at the college bookstore. My PhD program fell away quietly, one deferred semester at a time, until the letter came saying I was no longer enrolled. I remember Graham finding it in the mail pile and asking if I was going back to school. Someday, I said and smiled. He was always bright, even when we had little. Built computers from garage sale parts, entered science fairs with borrowed supplies. When he got a partial scholarship to Vanderbilt, I cried harder than I had at Daniel's funeral. The rest we made work with grants, side gigs, and loans I should have never signed, but did anyway. I told myself he'd pay it back one day with success, if not with money. After college, Graham came home with startup dreams and a business plan that needed funding. I co-signed the first loan he couldn't qualify for, and when the bank hesitated, I used part of my pension savings to tip the scales. It's just until we get traction, he said. I'll make it all worth it one day, Mom. He called me when he landed his first round of seed funding. I'd just come in from the grocery store, and the call caught me at the sink. We're official, he said, breathless. Tech lines live. You're going to be proud of me. I told him I already was. Years passed and the calls became fewer. At some point, they stopped being about sharing things and started being about asking, can you co-sign this line of credit? Can I use your name for the lease on the office space? It always felt temporary, always spoken with a promise. Just for now, you're the only one I trust. When he got married, I flew out to San Francisco and sat near the back while Lydia's family took up the first 2 rows. No one asked me to stand for photos. I didn't ask either. Still, I never missed a birthday, never missed a transfer when he needed help smoothing out a payroll month. And when I opened that letter yesterday, I thought maybe I'd imagined the distance all these years. But I hadn't. That morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and took out the old file from the bottom drawer, the one with the trust paperwork. It was a Thursday morning when I saw the photo. My niece Ava had posted a boomerang on Instagram, her flipping through a set of thick, embossed invitations tied with navy ribbon. She was holding one up like a trophy. The caption read, "Can't wait for the Whitmore family reunion, Napa. Here we come." I stared at the screen a full minute before I let myself breathe. I hadn't received anything. Not a phone call, not a text, not even a mass email. I scrolled through the comments. Lydia had left a row of heart emojis. Someone from her side of the family chimed in with, "Can't wait to see everyone. Governor might be coming too." Another said, "The Whites know how to throw a legacy event." Me legacy. I refreshed the mailbox that afternoon. Just junk, a charity catalog, a coupon for tire rotations. I checked the kitchen counter, the hall table, the space beneath the front door where envelopes sometimes slip through. Nothing. That night, I called Ava. I didn't ask directly, just made light conversation. Asked about her new internship and let her talk. Eventually, she said, "Isn't it exciting about the reunion? Lydia has been working with some PR folks to get it featured in Heritage Families magazine." Then casually, "Are you and Uncle Graham flying in together?" I said. I didn't think I'd be going. Ava was silent for a moment and then said, "Oh, I'm sure it was just an oversight." It wasn't. 2 days later, Graham called while I was on the porch having tea with my neighbor Ruth. He was on speaker. I kept the phone beside me on the table. "I just don't think it's smart to have her there," he said, his voice clipped and cold. "She doesn't understand the kind of image we're trying to project now. Lydia's parents have been coordinating the guest list with the Bradfords and Optics Matter." Ruth looked at me sharply, but I just stared out at the garden, silent. "I'm not trying to be cruel," Graham added, "but sometimes you have to curate your legacy." I ended the call before he finished. Ruth didn't say a word. She just reached over and placed her hand on mine, firm and quiet. The next morning, I called Elliot. Elliot still kept his office in the old converted carriage house on Broad Street, the same place Daniel and I first met him when we updated our wills after Graham was born. I hadn't been inside in over a decade, but the moment I stepped through the heavy oak door, the quiet stillness of the place folded around me like an old coat. He looked up from his desk and gave me that patient nod of his. "Mara," he said gently, "I was wondering if I'd be hearing from you." I didn't sit right away. I just placed the envelope with Graham's letter on the desk between us. Elliot read it. His expression was unreadable. Then he looked up at me. "You're sure?" I was sure. The moment I realized he meant every word, we spent the next hour going through the trust paperwork. The original setup had been simple. $1.5 million in real estate proceeds Daniel had left behind, placed in a long-term trust intended to support Graham's future. I'd kept it quiet, waiting for the right time to tell him. But when his startup gained momentum and he was borrowing from investors, I figured it was the right moment. I told him then. He called it generous, called me thoughtful. I called it love. "I want him removed," I said, my voice steady. Elliot didn't flinch. "Do you have an alternate beneficiary in mind?" I did. I pulled out a folded sheet from my purse and passed it to him. On it was the name of my goddaughter, Jade Taylor, 19, working part-time at a grocery store while raising her 2 younger siblings after her mother's overdose. She was accepted to Clemson but deferred a year because no one else could watch the kids. "She's not family by blood," I said. "But she never asked me for a thing. Still brought groceries when she knew I was sick. Still calls me ma'am, even when I asked her not to. And when I told her I was proud of her, she cried." Elliot nodded and began drafting the revisions. I signed where he told me to, each pen stroke cleaner than the last. I didn't rush, didn't tremble. With every letter of my name, it felt like I was stitching shut a wound that had been left open far too long. When we finished, he slid the final copy toward me. "It's done. He'll be notified formally by the end of the day tomorrow." I picked up my purse, ready to go, then paused. This trust was meant for someone who understood sacrifice. That's not my son anymore. As I stepped back out into the Charleston sun, I realized I wasn't angry. I was clean, empty in a way that left room to breathe. That evening, I roasted a chicken for one and turned my phone to silent. The next day, the calls started. By mid-morning, my phone had already vibrated itself halfway across the kitchen counter. I let it. The first call came in just after 8. Graham. Then again, then Lydia, then an unknown number I suspected belonged to their lawyer. By 10 WAG, I had 17 missed calls and 3 voicemails marked urgent. By noon, the count was over 40. I turned the phone face down and went outside. The camellias were blooming early, their soft petals flushed with color. I knelt beside the bed of begonias, loosening the soil with a hand rake. The sun was sharp but pleasant, and the air carried the faint smell of jasmine. I let myself get lost in the rhythm of tending to things that couldn't talk back. At one point, Ruth came over from her yard and raised an eyebrow. "You going to answer that thing before it explodes?" "No," I said. "I don't think I am." I came in briefly to refill my water and saw the screen light up again. Graham, 47 missed calls. The voicemails had piled up. I played the first few while standing at the sink. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" His voice cracked high with disbelief. "You can't just pull something like that. Do you know what position this puts me in next?" "Lydia, this is outrageous. We are trying to build something that matters here. And you've just blindsided us with what bitterness." Third, a man I didn't know. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Calvin Royce. I represent several of TechLine's early investors. We urgently request a conversation to clarify your recent actions regarding the Whitmore Trust." I deleted each message after listening, then turned the phone off altogether. That evening, I opened my email on the desktop computer in the back room, 67 unread. Some subject lines were in all caps. One read, "You're jeopardizing everything." Another simply, "Call me, please." I marked each one as read, then archived them all. The silence felt earned. The next morning, a courier arrived with a thick manila envelope. Formal notice from Graham's legal team, requesting immediate reversal of the trust reassignment. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table next to the napkin holder and went back outside. I spent the day fertilizing the blueberry bushes. The soil was dry and resistant, but I worked it loose with patience and gloved hands. My knees ached by the time I finished, but it was a familiar kind of pain, the kind that comes from care, not regret. Later that afternoon, Ruth returned with sweet tea. "They're still trying to reach you," she said, handing me the glass. "They'll run out of energy before I do," I said. She nodded. "You're steady, Mara." "I've had practice." That night, I sat on the porch and watched the light in the windows fade to amber. The sky was soft with the coming dusk. The phone, still turned off, sat inside untouched. The next morning, Graham showed up on my doorstep. He didn't call ahead, just knocked sharp, impatient, like someone with a right to demand time and answers. I opened the door, and there he was, standing on the porch in a navy blazer, far too polished for Charleston's humidity. Jaw tight, mouth already forming questions he didn't wait to ask. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he said. I stepped aside, wordless, letting him in only because I didn't want Ruth or the mailman to hear the shouting I knew was coming. He walked straight through the hallway like he still remembered the layout, like he expected things to stay just as he left them. When we sat, it was across the kitchen table, same spot he used to do homework, legs swinging off the chair when they were too short to reach the floor. "This trust," he began, voice clipped. "You had no right to change it without at least discussing it with me." "I had every right," I said evenly. "You blindsided me. Lydia's parents are furious. We're in the middle of a funding round. Do you understand what kind of instability this signals?" I folded my hands in my lap. "You didn't send me an invitation." He blinked. "What? To the reunion? You didn't send me one. Everyone else got theirs weeks ago, but you didn't even extend the courtesy of pretending." He sighed, the kind of exhale that says this is all so beneath me. "That wasn't intentional, Mom. It's a misunderstanding. And now you're throwing everything away over that." "Was I invited?" His mouth opened, then closed. Silence. I nodded. "That's what I thought." He leaned forward, more aggressive now. "We can still fix this. Optics can be managed. We just need to issue a correction. Say you had a medical emergency, something sympathetic but clean. Reassign the trust. Smooth it over quietly and keep up the illusion. It's not about illusion," he snapped. "It's about preserving the brand, the family legacy. We've built something and now you're detonating it because of a clerical oversight." I stood then. "You cut me out emotionally long before I cut you out financially. This isn't about a reunion, Graham. It's about 30 years of being used as a backup plan and ignored the rest of the time." He looked up at me. "That's not fair." Neither was asking me to co-sign 3 business loans and then erasing me from your life. He was quiet again. But this time not out of shock, out of calculation. I saw it in his eyes, the math of damage control already underway. When he stood, he didn't thank me, didn't apologize, just said, "We'll see what our lawyers advise," and walked out. I didn't follow, didn't close the door until I heard his rental car pull away. Inside, the manila envelope still sat on the table unopened. Later that night, Elliot called with news that changed everything. Elliot's voice was lower than usual, even for him, Mara. He said, "There's something I need to tell you, and I didn't want it coming from anyone else." I sat down slowly, bracing myself. 3 weeks ago, Graham submitted paperwork attempting to use the trust as collateral for a private lending deal. He didn't notify you, of course. He presented himself as the authorized manager, which legally he wasn't. But he was banking on your continued silence, your trust in him, and the assumption you wouldn't interfere. I closed my eyes for a moment. Was it legal? Not quite. The trust terms required your approval for any disbursement or lien. But he came dangerously close to executing the loan before we filed the reassignment paperwork. And what was the loan for? Elliot hesitated. A short-term bridge investment through a third-party shell group based out of Nevada. I've reviewed the company, Mara. It's shaky at best, possibly a front for shifting high-risk assets off Techline's books ahead of their next round of funding. If you hadn't pulled the trigger when you did, and that deal had gone south, you could have been liable. I stayed quiet. It felt like the kind of moment that should come with rage. But instead, I just felt a slow, cold understanding slide into place. A weight that settled in and filled all the empty space he'd left. "Elliot," I said, "I wasn't just left out. I was being positioned again." He didn't argue. He just said, "You did the right thing. And not just emotionally, financially, legally. You protected yourself." I thanked him, though it felt insufficient. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the wood floor beneath the ceiling fan. He hadn't just excluded me. He'd gambled with me in silence, counting on the same loyalty I'd always shown, and he would have done it again. By the time I went to bed, the manila envelope was in the trash, ripped clean through the middle. The next day, I got a message from Jade. Jade met me on a Monday afternoon, wearing the same faded green hoodie I'd seen her wear all winter. She looked nervous, eyes darting from the bank's high ceilings to the polished tile floors, like she didn't quite believe she belonged there. I told her she did. We sat with the banker, and I explained the account. Her name would be primary. Funds would be released as needed for tuition, housing, and books. I kept the language simple, the tone steady. She listened, nodding slowly, not speaking much until it was done. When we left, she stood on the curb and turned to me with tears caught at the corners of her lashes. "No one's ever done something like this for me," she said. I smiled. "You earned it, sweetheart. I just helped open the door." That week, I started volunteering at the neighborhood community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I taught a small group of young women how to read loan contracts, understand interest rates, and open savings accounts that couldn't be drained by someone else's decisions. I brought snacks and made copies. Most of them didn't ask questions at first, but they kept coming back. It felt right, putting something in the world that didn't depend on someone's approval to hold value. That Friday night, after the dishes were washed and the porch light clicked on, I opened the cedar box from the hallway closet and pulled out the photo. Graham, at 8 years old, holding a paper trophy he'd made for Best Mom ever in crayon. I sat in the quiet and traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. "I let go to protect myself," I whispered. "I still love you, but I love myself now too." The next morning, I received a formal letter from Graham's attorney. The letter sat unopened on the counter for hours. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what it said. Legal threats dressed as concern, consequences framed as conversation, but it didn't matter anymore. I had already stepped off that path. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. Sometimes it looks like silence, and sometimes it looks like walking away for good. I folded the letter in half without opening it and slid it into the drawer where I kept old receipts and expired coupons. By dusk, I was packing a small suitcase. I drove out before sunrise, the town still asleep behind me. The road was quiet, steady beneath the wheels. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming something I'd left behind long ago, myself, my voice, my right to peace. We don't always get to choose who we love, but we do get to choose who we keep. And sometimes the bravest act of love is letting go. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you gave everything to, I hope you know you're not alone. I'll be reading your stories, every single one.